Aloha Mavericks from all around the world. My name's Mike Kelly and I'm super excited to bring you yet another episode of Unmapped, a podcast exploring the world through the eyes of remarkable humans on extraordinary journeys. I hang out with pioneers, adventurers and trailblazers from around the planet, hearing their stories and unlocking the lessons learned from a life on and off the beaten path. And just a little bit of housekeeping, if you're enjoying the show, please consider sharing it with your friends, following and reviewing us wherever you listen to it, and check us out on Instagram at UnmappedPod. It would mean the absolute world, and I guess you get to come and hang out, which could be fun. All right, let's get into the show. On this episode of Unmapped, we're speaking with David Goulet. David is some sort of phenomenon. He found his way to India in the 60s, where he went to Swami Gitananda's ashram and proceeded to really embark on a deep journey of understanding body, mind, breath, and the chakra systems through a dedicated practice of yoga. I mean, he's been doing yoga for hours a day for 50 to 55 years and now runs a yoga teacher training institute in Ko Phan Gan in Thailand. Being able to have a conversation with someone like this who has had some incredible experiences that have led him to deep insights into the nature of reality, the universe, and humanity was extremely profound. And I was so lucky to being able to take this time from David to have a conversation with him. It is a seriously illuminating conversation. Some of it absolutely beggars belief. I really, really hope that you enjoy this conversation. David was just, incredible to talk to. So without any further ado, I'll stop. Here it is. Please enjoy this conversation with David Goulet. David, hello, and welcome to Unmapped. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show now that we've finally got here after all of those technical difficulties we just had. How you doing, man? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm still pretty chill here in Bangkok at the moment. Nice to talk to you, and let's make this a very interesting conversation, I guess. An interesting life, and you're curious about it, so let's talk.
I don't think you could ever do a non-interesting conversation from the research that I have. Rather than me choosing the topic, I'm thinking that if we can't introduce you by the kind of chronological, this happened and I chose to do this and then that happened way of introducing you, what would be the best topic or the best way to start this conversation to give people an idea of who you are as a person?
Well, I guess we could start with the subject of yoga, since that has been my life since I was 21. And I have done a lot of study, research, and I bring in a lot of scientific research, and I practice a lot of things. I've experimented with all kinds of diets, all kinds of breathing techniques, all kinds of postures. And originally my goal was learning about states of consciousness. I didn't get into yoga for health reasons because I was healthy enough. But I was fascinated by states of consciousness that could be changed, and discovering that this was all within your brain chemistry. And later years, I've been doing this for over 50 years, almost 55 or something. So in the beginning, it was hard to do research because you had to go to libraries and look here and go to universities and talk to people. Now it's just one click away for everything. And the research, the scientific research is verifying everything that yoga has been stating for thousands of years about the mind-body connection, about how your thoughts are influencing what your body chemistry is. And this whole link, mind-body, is a big part of what I have been fascinated by, what I have studied, and what I do. And because I practice yoga all the time and have for all these years, then I am a kind of an example of maintaining high standards of health and high standards of consciousness through living in the normal world as well as living in whatever ashrams and caves in the Himalayas or whatever that was.
Have you actually lived in a cave in the Himalayas?
Well, not long, but I spent some time in the Himalayas and temples and obscure little temples. Some of them were built out of caves. There's even some of those here in Thailand, actually. A place called Krabi. There's the Tiger Temple, which is a whole bunch of caves in the rock, and then the monks go and live in there. I spent time in there also in later years. But that's a place where you have this peaceful non-interference and no electrical disturbances and no Wi-Fi kind of thing. Of course, there was no such thing as Wi-Fi when I began my journey.
What do you remember? Do you remember the first time you ever did yoga?
Oh, 1969. All right. I started traveling and I started playing with yoga at the same time. And then the journey in the outer world of going to different countries became more and more of an internal journey as I went through Asian countries started in Mexico, States and Mexico, and then Japan to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and up here to Thailand, and then to India. By the time I got to India, I had been practicing for about a year with a really good book called Yoga and Health by Yasuri and Haich, which was a good foundation, actually. And at first, that the Hatha Yoga, the stretching stuff, was not that appealing to me because I was pretty stiff, even as a 21-year-old. I had to work my body and get the stiffness out, and it wasn't that pleasant until I got to the ashram, and then that was pretty intensive because the training I did was 6 months long, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, no holidays. So you're immersed in the yoga lifestyle. And by the time you finish a 6-month training course, you're so used to doing all of this that missing your morning breathing break is like missing breakfast and something's wrong. It becomes part of my habitual way of life.
So, okay, and just for context for everyone, we'll go into your ashram experience. Do you maybe want to just talk about a very brief overview of your life in Canada, the job that you chose to leave, and why you chose to begin this journey of travel that led you to the ashram?
Yeah, okay. That's a subtle question. I had gone into civil engineering, from civil engineering into legal surveys, working for the government of Manitoba to begin with, the government of Ontario, secondarily. Spent 3 years doing that. And, a government position in Canada at that time was a guaranteed life job with your retirement fund in place and everything is set up. And you just carry on doing the same work day after day for 40 years until retirement. But there was something missing. It was like I was really good at it, and I was working my way up the ladder with this apprenticeship program. And I wrote the second series of exams and went through that with flying colors. And then I handed in my resignation 2 weeks later. And everybody thought, you're crazy. But the lifestyle, because we were living on a government expense account and staying in hotels, and people would just sit around and either go down to the pub and drink or watch TV and smoke cigarettes and every night. And it's just like, to me, this is kind of a dead end. This is what people are doing for 40 years. There just must be something more interesting in life.
I know, right?
I had this curiosity sense. Okay, what else is there? And then I was going to the library, picking up books, and I was interested in the mind already, picking up books in the psychology section of the library. And there were books on yoga in that section and books on Buddhism in that section. And these were talking about states of consciousness they were talking about energy fields, and I was quite interested in Albert Einstein and the theory of relativity at that time. So energy fields and energy and matter, all of this. So it tweaked my interest, and I've read some books on yoga. And then when I started traveling, quit the job, resigned, and began my travels, I had my little library in the back of my car. I was cruising around America in a big fancy Oldsmobile with my library books and reading and looking around. And I think I mentioned to you before, as I was traveling around, I would sometimes pick up hitchhikers because I had a big empty car. And one of the hitchhikers talked for a while. You hear about my story about leaving civilization and just going on a journey of discovery. He says, "Oh, I know a journey you'd like to take." And he gives me this little pink pill of strawberry acid, which I had no knowledge and no experience of any of these things, of course. And I carried it around for a month before daring to take it one night on the beach in Florida. And
Strawberry Fields, right?
Strawberry
The
Fields
Beatles.
Forever. I thought, I had thought that was a pretty stupid song. What the hell are they saying? And that night I discovered what they were talking about. Strawberry fields where nothing is real and everything lasts forever. It's like, okay, I can see this timelessness and energy was coming at me from all around. Everything was glowing. This was the middle of the night. And I could see all the auras around all the plants. Everything was alive. Everything was glowing. So this is my first experience of seeing energy, which I had been interested in, which I was studying. And this made me decide, okay, well, I need to go and find out more about this consciousness that can be changed by taking this tiny little pink pill that alters your brain chemistry and you have a completely different perception on life. So this is when I made the decision, okay, I'm going to go to India and follow up on this yoga thing, because this is where they're talking about consciousness, energy fields, higher states of consciousness. I didn't know what that meant until that night. I realized, oh my God, we don't have to always see things in the same boring way. All of a sudden, I'm seeing like I've never seen before, kind of like a newborn who comes out and opens his eyes to the world. And, whoa, what is this? Everything was totally fresh and new. And to me, that state of consciousness was fascinating. Okay, this is worth exploring. So this was my motivation. Why I went to India, and it took me a year to get there. And in that year, I was traveling with fellow travelers, many people who had also kind of dropped out of civilization and were traveling to learn and just to explore, and did various exchanges and had a few more experiences with various chemicals and drugs that were around at that time. And then I got to India and I just stopped everything and dove into yoga full force, clean, and did all the detoxification and all these things that are part of yoga. The detoxification, the stretching, the limbering up of the body. And as I said, in this first year, working just with a book and following the poses, I did not enjoy trying to stretch my legs. It was not pleasant. But after 1 month at the ashram and doing fasting and saltwater flushes and all kinds of breathing and stretches, my body completely changed. Within a couple of months, it became flexible. I could do all these things that I had never done before. I realized, the body is quite changeable. And I'm still working with all these things and maintaining a youthful flexibility and vitality, which hasn't changed in decades. It's like, okay, the theory of yoga is you can maintain life, you can maintain your state of consciousness, you can maintain your health standards as long as you are doing the maintenance. It's the same as any other gizmo machine or motorcycle or whatever you have. Maintenance keeps them going for a long time. And now after 55 years of practicing yoga, I don't have any health issues.
So you got and this is commonly
Okay,
seen.
I found this on the web for yoga, is that you can maintain life, you can maintain your state of consciousness, you can maintain your health standards as long as you are doing the maintenance. It's the same as any other gizmo machine or motorcycle. Whenever you have maintenance, keeps on going for a long time. And after 55 years of practicing,
Is there
Yogi,
a
I
way-
don't have
what
any
is
health
it?
issues. Check it out.
Thanks, Siri. Oh my god! I don't know if we can edit that out, but if we can't, I'm so okay with that being there. Okay, so I think I've just activated your Siri, your artificial intelligence on your phone or your laptop, which is always kind of scary. You did a DNA age test which showed, and I think that's in the recent couple of
Last
years.
year, yeah.
What was talk me through that, because this is a proof of what yoga has done for your body. Talk me through how that test actually works, what that process was like, and what your current actual age is, and what your current, I guess, biological age is. Yeah.
So I had been listening to Gabor Mate, who's a medical doctor.
He's
Talks
brilliant.
about-
Love him. Yeah.
And he's talking about the telomeres at the end of your DNA. And you can measure the age by measuring the unraveling of these telomeres. So I said, well, I feel like I'm, 30 or 40 years old. So what's the reality? How come I feel that way? So I went to talk to a medical doctor on the island of Ko Phan Gan. He said, yeah, we can do DNA testing, telomere testing specifically. I need blood samples. We send them to Bangkok. And about a week later, he sends me a message. He says, David, you're a young man. Your telomere testing is showing that your biological age, the age of your cells, is 48. My chronological age is 74. Well, I'm 26 years younger biologically than I'm supposed to be chronologically. And because I feel that, to me, this is the reality is how I feel. And I feel this reality. And here's scientific proof that my cells actually are at a much younger stage.
That is amazing. So we're talking about at the cellular level.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. How does that even, so I've done some yoga and I haven't done anywhere near enough. And it's because part of my issue is that I'm so tight and I just struggle with it so much. Like I've been meditating for a long time, and it sounds like I need to come over and get some lessons, do some classes with you. But so I have this innate understanding from the limited amount of yoga that I've done that it is something that will, one, connect my body to my mind and allow me to drop into meditation at a much deeper level, but not to the level that you've been able to go into. But I have an appreciation for the possibilities that are there with yoga. But when you're talking about literally almost slowing down the fundamental speed at which your cells, like not your heart, not your limbs or muscles, like we're talking like the cells in your body slowing down, like that is insane.
Yeah. Well, one of the things in my research and studies back in the 80s was plugging into, I used to pick up magazines. This was before the internet age, okay? A magazine called Psychology Today that I used to, when I was out and about, I'd see one of these, I'd pick it up. And there was a report in there about testing they had done on people's breathing compared to the aging process. They were studying old folks, and there was a massive study of like 100,000 aging people, studying them and seeing that the more they aged, the less they were breathing. Okay, so I was already years into yoga and doing various breathing techniques. And I thought, well, this is significant. And the last paragraph of the study, they said, we could not determine whether the aging was causing the breathing to go downhill, to become less and less, or the breathing becoming less and less was causing the aging.
Right.
And I said, well, yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, that's a really important part of that equation. Like, which way does it go? Is it the chicken or the egg?
So I have all along, I'm always looking at the scientific research and studies, and I studied physiology and cellular metabolism and whatnot, and realize virtually every cellular movement, every chemical reaction within the cell requires oxygen. And if there isn't enough oxygen, the cell does not perform its function that well. And the cell does not reproduce as well.
I'm catching on. Yoga's about breathing. It's
This
about
is-
the flow of oxygen through your
Yeah.
body. I'm catching. I'm with you here. Keep going. Keep going.
So, understanding that and then supplying more oxygen all the time, which is half of the picture. The other half is your cells are always producing carbon dioxide, which becomes a toxic material that throws your body into an acidic state. And if you don't exhale all of that stuff out, it's going to cause chemical imbalance and chemical malfunction and whatnot. So exhaling completely, breathing in real, fresh, clean air are fundamental to our health. And now, many years later, I am showing that this works. But I do practice hours of deep breathing. I've trained myself. It's not a question of doing a 10-minute alternate nostril breathing in the morning with a yoga class. It's how many hours per day are you actually using your full lung capacity? And most people are using 10% of their lung normally, unless they're actively doing something. Then it increases. But if you look at our lifestyle, we're not active. We're sitting. We're working on the computer. We're doing all these little things that do not activate the metabolism. We have a natural reaction when we are active physically to breathe more deeply and the heart is pumping faster. But we don't get that when we're just working with our brains under stress and using only our fingers on a keyboard. So, yeah, so we need to train ourselves to take this complete breath, which is called in yoga Mahat Yoga Pranayama, the grand yogic breath. So you train yourself on
Okay.
how to do that, and then you apply that. And I do maybe 4 hours of that in a day. Plus, in between times, my body is already breathing more than the 10%. It stays at 20% instead of 10%. And then it keeps reminding me, hey, take another breath.
Wow. Okay. So, uh, a million questions are coming to my head, but one that I want, like, so I do a lot of kind of meditation and not so much breath work, which is something that has become really, really massive. It's like, I think all over the world, particularly in Sydney where I am, there's a couple of really great breath work teachers, but just simple breath awareness. But when I first learnt to meditate, I was taught by a guy who had done a lot of time over in India, and he was actually my therapist, but he wasn't a therapist. He was like, kind of like, I walked in, sat down and said, what do I need to do? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, just don't do anything. Just let it all go. And I was like, I don't get it. And then I started to get it, and very non-dual kind of spiritual coach. And I was very lucky to have him. And he got me, the first time I ever meditated was to put earplugs in my ears. And he taught me to breathe from the back of my throat. So like not just the back of my throat, but almost like instead of pulling using muscles here or in my lips, he actually taught me to focus from the back of my throat down to about the chest and actually pull the air in from the back, like the back of my throat and down. I think that's some form of pranayama breathing. Can you just, if that's not, can you maybe just like revise how I'm thinking about pranayama breathing?
There's many different techniques in pranayama yoga. In my little book that I learned from Swami Gitananda, I think I have 60 something breathing techniques. One of them is called Ujjayi. And Ujjayi is constricting your throat so that you can feel and hear the sound as you're inhaling and exhaling.
Yes. Okay, so that's one type of pranayama breathing, because that Ujjayi is what I think you used to call it too.
Ujjayi. Ujjayi breathing.
and I can train it. I train it so it sounds like a tsunami and a wave of breath is coming through. And that's how I learned to meditate. That was like I learned to meditate and be present on that sound. So okay. So second question, it's like you can go into the different pranayamic breathing, but I'll pave the way for the next question after if that's okay. So if this is all about breathing, if people sit and meditate all day every day but don't do the yoga aspect, is that like, it's obviously not the same, but in which ways is it different to someone to be an exceptional breather through meditation and doing the yogic practices?
The yogic practices involve postures and then movement from one posture to the other. The breathing brings in the oxygen that then fills the bloodstream from the lungs to the bloodstream, and because you're moving, it gets circulated virtually to every cell in your body. So this is how the two of them combine to create this rejuvenating effect. If you're only sitting and meditating, doing the breathing, the circulation to the rest of your body isn't that active. So you want to bring in these other aspects of yoga. But fundamentally, you can be doing the movements and the postures, you can be doing these things, but if you don't have the oxygen level, it's not going to be that good for you. In fact, you could be moving toxic material from one part of your body to another by doing this. And I go and I work out in the gym sometimes, and I'm applying my breathing techniques as I do this. And I see that the gym workout, people are working very hard. And when you do that, your muscles will demand the oxygen. Demand. Literally, they will take the oxygen. Now, what's happening to your liver and your pancreas and your heart is they're working under stress, but they're not getting the oxygen because it's all going to the muscles that you're moving with. So this kind of a workout, long term, is making your muscles stronger, but your internal organs are still degenerating. And if you become aware of that, and you learn to feel that, you stop and think, okay, do some deep breathing in between the sets of muscular activity. This is a very important part for longevity, for keeping your internal organs in top peak performance. And again, the workout in the gym, the jogging, the sports are all just targeting the external side, the muscles. If you don't look after the internal, they're the ones that support everything. So great, you got strong muscles, but your liver is going into catharsis. And it's going to develop some kind of a liver problem. It might even be cancerous or whatever. If you understand how the cells work, and you keep the circulation going to all those cells, and you keep the oxygen going, and you keep eliminating the toxins, the carbon dioxide, the main toxin that every cell is producing all the time. It's simple, but doing it, training yourself to remember to breathe is another story. I mean, it took me years. And then you know about breath work, and now it's become a popular thing all over the world. Well, okay, you can go for a weekend workshop and do breath work. But, out of the 7 days in a week, how are you breathing the rest of the time? And then you go ahead.
Sorry, keep going. You're on a roll.
When you're dealing in a society that is high stress and people under stress and their brain cells are using all the oxygen because they're thinking so much, your brain cells will use as much oxygen as the rest of your body. But you're not breathing. So they start degenerating. And then you end up with all these mental problems, from stress to anxiety to the degenerative diseases of Alzheimer's and all this stuff. It's all so connected. Understand the basic simplicity. A cell has multiple different chemical reactions, and all of those reactions require a fair amount of oxygen, and you need to keep eliminating the carbon dioxide for them to function, for them to reproduce. And this is this aging process I talked about, where they studied the old folks, and hey, You breathe less and less as you grow older. Your cells degenerate. The next generation of cells becomes not quite as good as the last one. And over a number of years, this becomes simply degenerative. Everything starts breaking down. The function of the glands goes down until they simply malfunction.
Wow. Okay. Well, so I can't believe you've never done a TED Talk, for one. I mean, this is just blowing my mind a little bit. And something that actually came to my mind when you were saying all that, and this is a change in tact, but you were mentioning kind of just understanding the complexity, but also probably the simplicity of the way that a cell, the simplicity of how a cell works and how that interacts with every other cell, regardless of whether it's a cell within your kind of like within your heart or within your liver. They're all connected, and the thing that flows between them is oxygen. So breathe well. Something that came up for me just then was something that you said in the in your video, which I'll put in the show notes. It's your yoga story, and it was sorry, absolutely fascinating to just listen to you go on a 1 hour kind of like journey through your life, and to talk about these kind of things was absolutely fascinating. One thing that you said is that everything is energy and everything is spinning. And I thought, I know I get the everything is energy bit, and I've had experiences like the one that you had in the strawberry fields, as the Beatles would put it. And but the everything is spinning bit I'd never heard. How does that like this idea that everything is connected loops through quite well through this piece about everything being energy? I mean, I think everything is connected because it is all energy. Can you take all of what I've just said and just riff?
Okay. Good one. Everything is energy. Everything is spinning. Are you up on the quantum physics thing? That was another field of fascination for me, going from relativity theory back in the 60s to quantum physics as it has evolved, and all the research of the last century. It's fascinating and amazing. What's the difference between an atom and an electromagnetic wave?
Like in terms of quantum physics, isn't it honestly that the atom is observed? Like, is this the observation piece that if it's observed, then it's no? I'm talking about something.
Yeah,
different.
no, that is part of it.
Or was this right? The fact that it's observed turns it into waves change into something else if they're observed.
Yeah, a wave can change into an atom. A wave becomes an electron or a proton. And you know that there's an interesting part of yoga called yantra yoga that deals with geometry. And it's the geometry of the universe, which somehow somebody knew this thousands of years ago. So you have an electromagnetic wave coming like this. Okay? It's a wave.
Mm-hmm.
Wave function, they call it. Now you have one coming this way. When these two intersect, they become an electron spin. They revolve around each other, creating the spin. This gives us the impression there's an atom here. There's something solid. And according to physics, then the waves carry on, undisturbed, just like they were. There's just this moment when they intersect, they create an atom, and then they move on. Now the next waves come in and recreate the same atom.
What?
This is happening thousands of times per second. This is what's creating the reality that we think is the solid wooden table here.
Yes, everything is flickering in and out of existence like a million times a second, right? So this idea, I got really excited then and just interrupted. So I will just pause and head it back to you. This idea that everything flickers in and out of existence millions of times a second is something that we spoke about in Vipassana, and that's why you get the tingling feeling in your body when you're going really deep into a Vipassana meditation.
Yeah.
Is that what are we talking about the same thing?
That's what we're talking about. And in these meditative states, in the yogic training, is you're not just studying the theory of these waves crossing, but you're going into what is the feeling of the wave itself, and what is the feeling of these spinning electrons spinning around the nucleus of an atom, and the atoms coming together to make molecules that have multiple atoms, and they're all spinning, and then they dissolve and reformat. So here we've got an interesting clue in the yogic world of, if these waves of, in quantum physics, they call them waves of possibility. They have the possibility of becoming an atom, of going back to the wave. And the world we are looking at, the world we are living in, is the materialization of these waves as they come together. And what is influencing the wave is consciousness. Human expectation is determining whether these waves will come together into a specific molecular structure or a different one, or not at all. So when you grasp that and you start to format your mind and your thoughts and feel yourself in a youthful stage, and you believe that you can rebuild yourself molecularly by keeping these waves coming back into proper alignment to make the molecule,
Whoa.
you're right in there at the quantum physics. You're inside.
What the fuck?
So this, and you go there with feeling. It's an experience that becomes, it's a real buzz, and it becomes so intense. It's almost like an orgasmic buzz of feeling all this energy.
Yeah, I've been there. Okay, so let me just clarify something. Let me just clarify one of the many things that I feel like need clarifying. So this idea that that consciousness affects the waves, which is, and P.S. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure most of my audience will have a bit of probably even more of an understanding of this than me. When a wave is observed, it can change and turn into something observable.
Yeah.
If it's changeable at that level mentally, does that mean theoretically, I have no concept of how this works, and maybe this is not how it works, but theoretically, if I was good enough at this, I could close my eyes and open my eyes and you would look different? Because can I, because I bet this is where I get stuck. Like, I can understand within me impacting the cells within my body, but how do I impact the cells? Can I, like, the cells in your body are still a part of that one consciousness. So theoretically, does that not mean I should be able to change the way that you look with my own observation of the waves?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned you had some experience, and if you have psychedelic experience, you can be looking at someone and you don't see them the same anymore. You can be seeing a different thing. And I mean, this is mentioned in the Upanishads and in the Yoga Sutras about this flickering stage of reality being like an old-fashioned movie with the frames clicking from one thing to the next. The atoms and molecules are coming together, dissolving, coming together, dissolving. At this stage, you're looking at the creation of everything. And when you're at this perception of seeing creation from energy into matter, you are influencing. And your primary influence is and should be in your own body chemistry, brain chemistry, cellular functions, all of these things that are happening in you. You can feel this. Okay? And the feeling gives you the actual experience of being in there, in this vibrational field. Being in someone else's molecular structure is a little further away. But in our meditational states, we're going into this feeling and the feeling I talked about. the vibration.
So
Go ahead.
no, you keep going. You once you wrap up, I'll go.
I mentioned the waves come together and create this atom, which is spinning instead of a wave. Okay. Now, in a molecule, when we're made of molecules, we don't have many simple atoms. We have combinations. This atom is spinning at a certain rate. This one at a different rate. It's oxygen, it's hydrogen, it's carbon coming together to make a molecule. Now, this molecule then has these different vibrations. And if you can feel them and hear them, it sounds musical. Okay? In yoga, you go deep enough inward to feel this vibration and hear it. These are two senses that can be extended into really high ranges, high frequencies. So every molecule in your body is made of many atoms. And each of these atoms is like part of an orchestra. So if you can hear this and it sounds good, you're going to be healthy. Now, if the instruments or the molecules are out of tune, the atoms are out of tune within the molecule, it's going to sound a little strange, and you are going to feel a little strange. All the way to feeling discomfort, to feeling dis-ease, and to being sick. So there was a brilliant scientist called Candace Pert, who died a few years ago. She is the one who discovered that there are opium receptors on our brain cells, long time ago. And then she continued her research. And she wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion, which are pointing to the fact that when we are feeling something, good or bad, what we are actually feeling is the vibration of our molecules. And when we have healthy, happy molecules, it's a good vibration. We feel good. When our hormonal balance goes out and the molecules are not formed correctly, we start to feel, hey, something's out of tune. Just like an orchestra where the violin is way off, out of tune, it sounds not harmonious. So this is the vibration level of our being, which we learn to experience, which you have experience with through your Vipassana. So going deeper in there, and then you're going in there with the consciousness of, well, actually, I can influence this. I can change the frequency. And here we get into mantra yoga, which is working with sound. And there are specific sounds connected to each of the chakras that when that sound is harmonious and in tune, you're going to be creating a good hormonal balance of whatever your body needs at the time. When you lose that and things become strange, out of tune, your hormones are out, your body chemistry is going off, and you become something in you becomes dysfunctional. Remember, every cell in your body is made of these molecules. Every cell in every gland, in every organ in your body is made of molecules. And when they are happy, when they have the nutrients they need, the primary one being oxygen, the molecules are happy, the cells are happy, the gland and the organ are functioning full capacity as needs be. This is the essence of our chemistry. We are chemistry.
Wow. So just to try and recap what we've talked about so far, because I think I need a recap for myself. So yoga is at a very simple level, or what yoga is, if you take yoga in the deepest way that you can sort of take yoga, it is the process of moving the body whilst breathing in a way that pulls oxygen around the body in order to keep the cells healthy, which are at the same time flickering in and out of existence billions of times a second. And if you can get down to that level of consciousness, then you can not only breathe to keep them healthy, but because you've breathed, you've been able to take yourself so deep, which I find is normally through breathing, you get to a level where you can actually influence these cells with your mind, because that's how quantum physics actually works. The viewing of these cells or atoms is what actually manifests them into reality.
Yeah. So at this
I
level,
love this chat.
hey, even if you're just breathing and you are supplying the oxygen, the cells know what to do. They will metabolize, they will create the chemistry they need, the hormones they need, whatever it is. Now, the interference comes from the mind. If you are thinking, well, my father was a diabetic, his father was diabetic, then it's highly likely that I will have diabetes, that my pancreas will not function to full capacity. This expectation in your mind can influence your chemistry enough to create what you are expecting. Mind over matter.
Okay. I think that, I mean, that does make sense. That actually does make sense to me. So I'm going to pull us out of this rabbit hole that we've just gladly frolicked down. And I want to come back to, so all of this is a lot of new information it's kind of intuitive information to me that I feel like I sort of understand and have some experiences with, but other people won't have. Can you explain, like, so we're going back to the ashram now, and we're going back to Swami Gitananda, your, like, the kind of guru that was at that ashram. When you went in for that 6 months of training, that was already halfway through. So I think your first experience was 4 months long. Where were you at in your journey of yoga when you first got there? And where did you, like, what did 4 months of very intense, were you having any experience of this kind of thing at that point? Like, where did you end that 4 month period of intensive training, and where did you start?
I started from a very stiff place. As I mentioned before, I wasn't really enjoying stretching my limbs or anything. But I found that by doing it every day, with the breathing and with the classical detoxing methods of yoga, fasting and drinking salt water to flush out your whole system, my flexibility increased dramatically, and my enjoyment of my bodies changed. My body wasn't a stick thing that I had to do work. It became enjoyable to move. And just this fact of enjoyment is indicating that my body chemistry had shifted into a harmonic happiness, which was cool. Now, as I said, my intent of going to study yoga was for the mind. I wanted to know more about the brain chemistry and how this worked and how we could influence it. And Swami Gitananda was Dr. Swami Gitananda. So he had studied medicine in England. He had lived in Canada. He was at some point part of the World Health Organization. And then he quit it all, went back to India to teach yoga. So this is the only thing that works.
He was half Irish, wasn't he? Like, he was half Irish, half Indian. Yeah. Okay, cool. So he had this, like, kind of Western / Eastern heritage and background and perspective.
Yeah. And he was really putting it all together and explaining things in this very physiological way, psychological way that totally made a complete package of understanding the human reality. And it was brilliant. And in the 4 months of training, I was just absorbing and practicing and listening to every word he said. And then when everyone left, there was just 4 of us left at the ashram. And I found, actually I had a cup of coffee, which I hadn't drank at that point. When I had the coffee, I realized, wow, I'm really awake and I'm seeing things that I associated with a psychedelic substance. I just had 1 cup of coffee. And I was playing with deep relaxation techniques, which was like Vipassana, going into non-thinking, non-moving, and just experiencing the body. And I could go in and really feel the buzz in my body by lying down and doing a breathing technique for a half hour nonstop, really oxygenating all the cells and activating them so that they're all kind of buzzing with activity. And then I started seeing that my brain chemistry was changing because I was seeing things in a psychedelic way with coffee. So this is a major change from the stiff guy who had showed up there months earlier. I was physically feeling really different and mentally getting to these states of consciousness that were literally trippy and making life more of a trip and more enjoyable. Everything was more beautiful. Everything was vibrant. And I could feel the vibration inside of me. It was a transformation.
Wow. And from there, and this is probably one of my favorite parts of your journey that you didn't talk too much into. After you come out of that 4 months, you decided that you weren't going to go back to the West and that you would stay and come back and do, I think, essentially that course again. And in the meantime, you wandered around India with the monks and essentially almost like wandered as a sadhu, like it's a sadhu, right? Like, do you have to be as a wandering monk a sadhu? Yeah. That must have been such an unbelievable experience. I have seen the sadhus, some sadhus probably from a specific, kind of like type of culture at Vipassana in Kathmandu. So once a year, everyone goes to temples and everyone like gets stoned. And there's like a lot of sadhus who walk barefoot from India to Kathmandu or two different temples in Nepal to sit and do that. And it was such an just like an out of world experience. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have actually been on a form of pilgrimage with them. Can you please just tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was another part of the journey, which really felt like home to me, just to be wandering around as a penniless monk, staying in different ashrams and going up into the mountains and just being completely present and practicing the things that I had learned. Of course, a lot of breathing. I was traveling, so sitting and doing all the postures wasn't always that easy. But these guys are all in a higher state of consciousness, or many of them. Many of them were smoking ganja all the time. Some were not. And the mentality of being clear and focused on just being in a higher state without material possessions is an amazing thing. For most Western people, to be without material possessions is scary. But these guys had nothing, and I had nothing. All I had was the blanket on my back, an umbrella, and I was wandering around with them practicing yoga.
That's all you owned. Like there was nothing left somewhere for like that's all you owned at this point in time.
When I first arrived in India, before the ashram, I was tired of carrying my 40-pound backpack through tropical countries. I went to the post office in Calcutta and I put stamps on it and I mailed everything I had back to Canada to my brother. And then I had my blanket, my umbrella from Malaysia. It was a bamboo umbrella. And I started wandering. From there, I went to the ashram and met Swami Gitananda. When I walked into the ashram, he looked at me and said, "Oh shit, this guy's a sadhu." You saw that I was a real student. I wasn't just there for curiosity. I was on the path, and he had total respect for that, and just we had a really good connection. And then with the other monks, again, traveling around and staying in temples, and staying in the temples, just sleeping on the concrete floor of the temples was just became okay and comfortable, and you actually sleep less, so you have more meditational time and less lazy time. But it was an experience in consciousness and having these experiences that were kind of mind blowing. When I went all the way up to Nepal and then up into Himachal Pradesh, which is where in Rishikesh you got the Beatles ashram, etc. And then many beautiful experiences along that path. Then when I came back down, I stopped in a place called Goa, which had beaches and ocean that I'd kind of been missing. And I sat on a rock and I did deep breathing and chanting, simply Om, vibrating and breathing for 4 hours without stopping. Now, towards the end of that 4 hours, I felt myself exhaling, and with the exhalation, my consciousness went out into orbit. Did you see that in my video?
I did. Yeah, I
I
did.
have a
I
separate
did.
video just on that. That was my first beyond the body, not out of the body. It was beyond the body, and going into orbit around the planet and seeing that time and space were these relative things. That if you go down into this space, you're in this time, and that space is a different time. And I realized, well, incarnation is from here, where you go down to incarnate, reincarnate into these different experiences. But out here, it was all timeless. The analogy I make in modern times is you download an MP4 file and you watch a movie. The movie is all on that file. The beginning, the middle, and the end are all there at the same time. But we watch it through a timeline. And that's our life here in this world. So the fact and what is stated in the Vedas, Upanishads, etc., is that time doesn't actually exist. And what is being rediscovered in quantum physics is time isn't a reality. It's a construct of the human mind. And when you come into incarnation to a body, you are viewing things from this perspective of the timeline. But out there, your consciousness can see the whole picture. And that's a mind-blowing experience. And the understanding that comes with it, with what I felt, I mean, I was laughing for days after that experience. This is just a big cosmic dream, and we're in it and playing all these roles. I understood things like Shakespeare saying, all the world is a stage and we're just playing our roles. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you reckon Shakespeare knew? Do you reckon he was like, he got to this point?
There have been a few people who know it. They give us the messages and people say, what? Like E equals MC squared. Well, how can matter and energy be the same thing in two different perspectives? But then you learn to see that in your experience. And that's the advantage of yoga. Is this whole quantum physics thing is you're experiencing the quantum fields. And with the experience, you can influence.
Wow.
In theoretical physics, you can have all these fancy formulas, mathematical formulas up on the blackboard. You can explain intellectually and with words. But when you have the experience, you're in a different place as far as being the influencer and the co-creator of your life.
So I actually have had the same experience or a very similar experience, but I did not get there through chanting and breathing, and that must have been so profound.
Yeah.
I'll share mine because I'm curious to see if it, because I actually didn't know what to make of this experience until I listened to your video, and once you talked about this experience, I was like, oh my god, that's what happened to me. So I sat in an ayahuasca ceremony last year, and I did 2 ceremonies over 2 days, and the first one was the most horrific experience of my life, and I did not want to go back in. It didn't make any sense. Everything melted. It felt evil. It was really, really tough. It was kind of half an ego death and spat out before I got to like the God bit at the other side. And it was a really difficult experience. And by some form of like stupidity rather than bravery, I decided to try again the next night because I wanted I felt like my journey was incomplete. I felt like I had to go in again. And I remember purging, and then after I purged, I got taken out of my body and into this like ethereal space, this big white blob in the middle, and then like literally an infinite amount of like little white blobs all around this big white blob. And every single blob had a little strand of energy connecting it to every single other blob. And then I would go up into the middle white blob, which is kind of like, I mean, that was pretty clear to me that was source, and this consciousness, this pure consciousness that you talk about. And then I'd zip through into along these lines of energy and into one of the smaller white blobs. And it would be this perspective of conscious expression in like the 850s, and it was like could have been a dog, and then I'd zoom through into something in the future, and then I'd zoom back to like some form of like Egyptian pharaoh, and then I'd go back to source, and it'd go around a bit, and then I'd come back to myself, and I'd be like, whoa, like what? And then I'd feel myself going again, and by this point I wasn't ready. Like once I came back to me, I remember just being like, no, I don't like it, because if I zip through multiple points of these conscious entities throughout time and space, if I went through enough of them, I'd start to forget who I was. I was becoming this expression of consciousness, and I'd forget that there was this thing called Michael in 2022 that existed, and I was starting to realize that I didn't know if I was ever going to come back, or I didn't know if I was real anymore. And every jump of consciousness away got me further and further. So I started to fight it a little bit. I couldn't fully let go of this perspective of Michael and who I was. But I remember being in that space, I could see every single little dot of perspective that has ever existed was irrevocably connected to every single other dot that has ever existed. And I've known within my body for a long time that everything is one and everything is connected. I had that experience through meditation nearly 10 years ago, but I'd never had the perspective of like across time. Like, so space made sense, but throwing time into that equation and saying that everything, like there's a movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's a movie came out last year that was called that. And I had this experience, and I never really clocked what I was experiencing. And then about 4 hours ago, when I was watching your 1 hour video, I was like, oh my God, that's what happened to me. Like it was like, whoa. So it's so crazy to me to think 10 years ago, if you had told me there's no such thing as time and space are essentially like two sides of the same coin, as are energy and matter, I would have just gone like, you're absolutely crazy. And now I feel like I'm the loopy one that kind of like doesn't even know how to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can see that is consciousness is shifting, global consciousness, and there's more people waking up to these things. And just as if you're just looking at the quantum physics thing and how that has emerged and come to this conclusion that nothing actually exists as we perceive it. Everything is just energy formations. And if you look at some of the modern research in UCLA in California, physicists are coming together and realizing that these waves of possibility are information waves. So the universe is made of information in wave format. I mean, we're using microwave technology to have this conversation. The information.
I feel like we're like I feel like we're one jump away from like we're in the Matrix. Like if we're all information, I feel like we're one jump away from we are the simulation here. Like,
Yeah, well, it's like that. So this coming together, this awakening of humanity, this awakening of science, and to discover what is reality actually, and how much of an influence do we have on this reality. This is where the yoga takes you into being director of the scenes in your own life. No,
so
go ahead.
we are like, so like, firstly, wow. And secondly, I want to consciously tie this in because there's something that we haven't really spoken about this whole interview so far. And it is the core of everything that you do. And it does influence and inform all of what all of what you've already been talking about. We actually haven't spoken about chakras, and we haven't spoken about this is everything that you do, right? Chakras are the cornerstone of what you've discovered. And I believe that you did say in your piece that the chakra system is the science of human reality. So I think just in terms of wherever we take this interview next, I wanted to just drop the word chakra in and let you sort of talk about what that means to you in the context of everything we've already been talking about and yoga.
Yeah, good point. Because the chakras are what interested me and drew me to India, because they're talking about these energy fields. And I was coming from Einstein's E=mc squared. Well, everything is energy, and they're talking about energy fields, and these energy fields have an effect on consciousness and da. So going deeper into that study, the chakras are like a schematic of how the energy works. They're a schematic of the form of the energy. Each chakra has a sound, a vibration, a frequency, and each one has geometry. Now, this geometry goes really deep, because now they're discovering that when you are looking at molecular structures, you're not seeing solid things. What you're seeing is paths that the energy is moving in. And these are symmetrical and geometric. So the geometry of your molecules is determined by the geometry of the chakras. And here's another link in the mind-body connection, where from what you are thinking and seeing in your mind to the glands and the organs, if that energy is clear and following the geometry, you're going to have clear, functional chemistry and body parts. The molecules of your adrenals, the molecules of your pancreas, all fit into a certain geometric pattern. And when that pattern is undisturbed, everything is cool. Now, I mentioned thinking. Thinking is using sound. Sound is mantra. Every chakra has a specific sound to center the energy and specific sounds in a distribution of that energy. These sounds are directing the evolution, the development, and the production of all of your chemistry, of all of your glands and organs, all the cells within the glands and organs. Now, every thought you have is a sound in your head. If those sounds are not good, the resulting molecules and chemistry are not going to be that good either. And that's going to be influencing the chemistry of your body. So understanding the chakras as the blueprints, the geometric blueprints of how the energy is laid out, was an important function. Now, in Raja Yoga, you use the geometry as a focal point, as a concentration, and it puts a certain image of geometry into your mind, and that helps your brain cells to format into that geometry. Now, when you're watching TV and you're watching bad news, those are all pictures going into your mind also.
Yeah.
So yoga has the chakra system for reformatting the correct brain brain structures that are then directing the energy in a positive way to glands and organs and creating thought patterns that are more happy, universal, and blissful than worrying about where's the next war going to be. Now, I'm sitting here in a hotel in Bangkok, and in the lobby there's a big screen TV, and all day long they're repeating these war scenes from Syria to Russia to the Ukraine to all over the place. It's all negativity, and people are watching this. What is that doing to your chemistry? Without considering, people don't think about it. Oh, this is influencing me?
How do we? I mean, I think that definitely there's a massive, I think almost like there's a huge portion of people that are starting to wake up to how negative a lot of things can be. And I think partially one of the things that concerns me is then if you stop trusting the institutional kind of media or the institutions full stop, and let's face it, they're not trustworthy, but then you go to a more democratized model of providing information for people or for governing or for just sort of like managing society, you open the door for a lot of bad actors and misinformation and things like that. And I think there's like, I mean, this whole question around, okay, so it's funny, like I try and be as clear as I possibly can in, okay, I don't want to consume this media, but then there's also so much media in, I guess, the free media part where I don't want to consume it either, because how much of that is actually real and how much of it is being driven by an agenda. But people think that because it's not the institutions, it must be reality, when really it's just another person driving a different agenda. So how do you get away from all of this, or is it just go inside, do yoga?
Going inside and discover the real programs, and that's what I'm talking about with the chakras and the geometry. And if you're watching sacred geometry, and you can find this on YouTube now, videos of sacred geometry unfolding with music are more beneficial than watching the bad news. In fact, the people who are supporting the bad news and creating it don't want the good news to get out. But we're talking about, actually, you can influence your health. I put some videos out on YouTube a couple of years ago about your immune system and how the immune system creates antibodies and how antibodies go and find the virus and they chop up the virus into molecular chunks. And they analyze those chunks and they make antibodies that can then come in and dematerialize the next virus, taking them apart molecularly. We have these capabilities. This is built into us. But they took down my videos. This is misinformation.
So they thought you were the fake news. Yeah. Oh wow, that's
the controlled media. Want everyone to follow the agenda. Want everyone to go get the jab. It's the reality is, if you discover yourself and you learn how to reactivate your immune system, you can be immune to everything. And this is one of the big things that I teach people, because we don't need to be sick. We're not designed to be sick, depressed human beings. We're designed as children to be playful and happy and enjoying life. But that's been taken away from us by media, by the role model is grow up and get a good job. A good job doing what exactly?
Yeah.
What are you going to do We don't have any creativity left. Just go work for someone else and do what they want you to do, and they'll give you money so you can buy a big screen TV and watch the news.
And that'll tell you how lucky you are because at least you're not in the middle of a war zone. So you should be happy to go to your job. Oh man. It's so interesting, right? I try and straddle a line of, reason or rationality, which I mean, I totally understand that there's going to be some people listening and going, you are the least rational person. Like you're sitting here talking about time not being real. And I tend to try and everything has to, I have a high barrier for believing something. So for me, like I have to have direct experience and it has to make sense to me before I get to the point. And so there's certain things from a mainstream media perspective that I'll take on, and there's a certain thing from alternative media that I take on. But if something like looks or smells dodgy or like it's not real or like there's no like integrity to the way that kind of piece of information is created, then I go like I'm a good bullshit detector for that. And so there's a lot of people that could tell me exactly what you're telling me right now, and I can tell that they don't know what they're talking about. They've heard someone else. They've probably heard you say it or someone say it and they start talking about it. But I can tell that they don't actually know what they're talking about. They just think it sounds cool or whatever. But I can tell with you that at the very least, you have the ability to like, you've gone so deep into these practices and to this way of life that you have. Like, I don't get the sense I'm talking to fate. Like, I don't get the sense this is fake news, you know, like it's very radical, and whether or not I can do the things you're saying over a lifetime, I don't know, but I get like a sense of integrity from you. And so it makes this a very interesting conversation for me because I'm in a space where I'm willing to open my mind to things that like I wouldn't have, like that I wouldn't normally be able to open my mind to. Which is just a fascinating thing to realize, and also to understand the challenges that we face, because like a lot of this stuff is really possible, but then there's a lot of charlatans talking about it. It makes it hard for people to believe that it's possible.
Yeah. So you can understand when I came back from India after 3 years of traveling and studying,
in the 70s,
in 1972, I didn't know what to say to people. What did you learn?
What?
Let's see. I didn't know where to start. I mean, yoga was not a common word in those days. People didn't know what yoga was. Never mind chakras, you know. But I had learned all of this stuff. I had this encyclopedia of esoteric knowledge, which was also scientific, but the science wasn't quite there yet in the West. So I ended up, I couldn't speak to people. I kept it to myself, and I went and lived in Guatemala, and I just practiced for years and started drawing mandalas of the chakras and writing about it. And then I'd slowly meet some people. Wow, what are you doing? That looks interesting. So I met some interesting people and built from there onto a new social world of people who have similar interests. But when I came back to my old friends from still working for the government in legal surveys, they just looked at me and said, "What the fuck happened to you?" I couldn't answer the question.
Everything and nothing at the same time.
There's no time. So I haven't been gone at all. It's all here now.
So how did you actually, before you move on to the kind of the future or whatever that means, in the future to 1972, David, but the past to us, and really apparently it's probably the present as well in somewhere somehow along the Akashic records of the universe. I noticed something that really fascinated me in this may have even been going through your autobiography, your biography. You mentioned that you were getting some extra teachings from Swami Gitananda, and he he took you and a few other advanced students through the what gods and goddesses are and how they relate to energies, chakras, and the relationships between different energies and chakras.
Yeah.
I found that fascinating, and I don't think I got the whole picture. So I'm wondering if you can go into that a little bit.
A little bit. A little bit won't be the whole picture. It's
I'll go into it a lot then. I don't mind.
Why in Hinduism, you have many gods and goddesses. I mean, from the Western perspective, we think of them as gods and goddesses, but they are really personifications of the forces that exist in the universe. I give you one example: Shiva. Okay?
Destruction.
Shiva is the god of destruction, the god of fire. Fire burns things and destroys them. Shiva is a personification of the universal reality that things change. Shiva is a personification of our power to change things, to create, to take one thing apart and change it into something new, which is essentially creativity. So Shiva represents that power. Now, this is in the third chakra, which is the fire element, Manipura chakra, and it governs our digestive system, which takes food molecules apart into smaller bits and pieces of amino acids and molecules, and then we recombine them into the molecules that we need. So this is all part of one process. This is all Shiva's power.
Wow.
Okay? But really, it's our ability to have a healthy digestive system that is capable of digesting anything and creating the proteins we need to rebuild our muscles. This is one aspect. Another one of the gods is Brahma. Brahma is the god of creativity. Brahma represents the ability of these waves to come together and make atoms. And in the sacred geometry I talked about, you have 4 angles. Okay, the waves cross at 90-degree angles. When they cross at 90 degrees, they become an atom. They spin around each other, become an atom, and then go on.
Yep.
So the god Brahma has 4 faces. Okay, he's looking in these 4 directions. And he is a personification of this energy coming together into atomic structures.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of these gods and goddesses. I have a second level in the yoga trainings that I do. I'm just rewriting the book now that goes into details of these gods and goddesses. And there's an animal in each chakra that represents the kind of energy that the chakra has, etc. It's a complicated education. So it's not like you go to a yoga class and learn this stuff. It's like getting your master's degree. There's a lot of details. And when you get all the details, it forms it like a puzzle. All these pieces come together and make the bigger picture. Holy shit. That's what I'm saying about the chakra system is a complete understanding of the human reality in relation to the rest of the universe. It's the geometric lines that come together to create and hold a picture in place.
Wow.
This is the chakra system. And everybody should know this. It's like having the owner's manual for your new gadget. You figure out how to use the thing. We've never been taught how to use this machine. How does it work? How does the immune system work? Nobody knows. Why don't we know this? There's something wrong with our educational system. We should be taught this in grade school. Why do we need oxygen? Oh, well, because every cell in the body is waiting for oxygen to do its job. I mean, kids can understand this and make sense of it really quickly. Adults have all these theories and concepts about disease, and the human body is, susceptible vulnerable to all these different illnesses, of which, there's 60,000 known diseases.
Did not. That's a lot of diseases. I actually thought there'd be more. I assumed
that was
the
years ago.
Western. It's a very mind based. It's a very mind based culture, right? Like a very thinking based culture.
Yeah. Well, Mike, what do you think of this interview? It's been an hour and a half plus. We're still going on.
It has. I was actually about to say, I feel like there is an opportune time to wrap up and pause for a second interview, which might go into like your time teaching. I was going to close off and ask, well, firstly, the question you just asked me, how is this interview? This interview is just everything that this interview is the reason that I do this. I am so grateful to be able to have conversations like this and to meet people like you who have really gone deep into something that they're so passionate about and who are looking at the world or themselves or both of them at the same time for all eternity in such depth and with such tenacity and passion and dedication. It's a real privilege to be able to have a conversation like this. I feel like I have learned so much about, I mean, like to the point where I'm in my brain and my body kind of thinking about how I can get to Ko Phan Gan to like do some yoga with you because it's like, this is like, I just never thought about yoga like this. And when you talk about it, it makes such intuitive sense to me that I feel like I really would like to connect to my body in this way. And it's crazy, like you said, that we're not taught to connect to our body in this way. And although it sounds like it's a lot, and when we give all of this information, it sounds overwhelming, but really all it is learning how to move and breathe and experiencing the lessons and learnings that come up from moving and breathing. Unmapped is about the journey. It's all about the journey. Your book, your biography was called The Journey In and Out.
Out and in.
To close out and in, out and in, out and in.
Started with an outer journey. And then, yeah.
Yes. What does the word journey mean to you?
Well, it's the experience of moving forward, which has been my life, and my life is an adventure. It started with that journey, and the journey is going on. Then the journey in is going, again, deeply into our atomic, molecular, electromagnetic structure and realizing it's the whole universe. So from that journey inward, you become the expanded universe. It's all an exploration. It's all, every step of the journey is interesting and fascinating. And like children discovering, that is our attitude, or should be our attitude. There's no room for boredom because you're discovering something new. That's the journey. It's discovery. And you know that your brain keeps growing and keeps reformatting itself as long as we are learning. When we stop learning and we think we know everything, the brain begins degenerating. So learning is such a fundamental part of human nature. Not of the other creatures and animals. They have their limitations. The human mind doesn't have limitations. And the journey goes beyond into consciousness that becomes consciousness of the whole universe. That's the journey. You could say it's an endless journey.
Yeah,
never ending.
Well, it is when you get to there, right? I took one thing that I just took from what you said was the idea that of learning, and that the brain begins degenerating as soon as you're not learning, is just taking your brain through a process of change. Learning is the natural state of change that provides growth and movement and energy and constant sort of like refreshment to your brain and your mind, which is something I've never thought about in that way before. David, thank you so much. I mean, we've really kind of only hit a bookmark here, so I would love to be having a second conversation with you over the next couple of months to treat my audience to. It honestly has been such an honor to be able to speak to you. I really love talking about topics like what we've spoken about, and it is so clear that you have a real gift for talking about it, and a really deep expertise and knowledge in the theory of what this is all about through your experience with 55 years of practice in yoga. So it's just such an honor to be given your time to be able to do this, and I'm extremely grateful. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm totally grateful too. I mean, my purpose is being a messenger for all of this amazing information that I've gathered through life, starting when I was 21 and realizing, oh my God, there's a whole new way of living. There's a whole new way of perceiving life. So this is an opportunity to let more people know of our infinite possibilities as humans, what we can do, what we're capable of, and how we can kind of reformat the world into a better place. So yeah, regarding that, and even the books, The Journey Out and In, people are interested, you can go to the chakrayoga.com site, and there's a series of books in there. The autobiography, did you read that, or you just saw the video? The reading is a lot.
I read some, and then I realized it was 280 pages long, and I was never going to get through the whole thing. But it is, I did. I mean, you write very well, by the way. You write very, very, very well. I did read. I looked for certain parts. I watched the video, and then I looked for certain parts to read. You write very, very well, and I will read all of it before a follow-up interview, because I feel like it will inform me a lot better in terms of understanding that journey. It was, I mean, you write very well.
Good, thanks. Glad it's understandable. That's part of being the messenger and part of the teaching. And most students who come through the courses here just say, this is amazingly transformational. And I explain science in layman's terms, including quantum physics, to the point of, hey, anybody can actually understand this. And especially if you start having the experiences of feeling the buzz of the cells within your own body, okay, this is reality. It's a reality check. Anyway, we can go on with that in the next interview. For now, here they say Swati Cup. In India, it's Namaste. Nice talking to you, and we'll do it again whenever you like.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it. And this is Mike signing off. Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into another installment of Unmapped. I really, really hope you enjoyed the episode. I always have a blast creating them, and it brings me so much joy to share them with you. As I said at the start, I'd really appreciate if you share, follow, and review the show if it feels right for you. I'd also like to thank my great mate Josh Ryan for the magic he makes in post-production, my studio partner Bondi Radio, and Arman at Moral Studios for the brand's design. I honestly could not do this by myself, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, I'm Mike Kelly, and this has been Unmapped.